Democrats keep proving they're bad at governing. Trump's been in office for only 4 days and has already done more than these clowns have in 4 years. Yesterday, he went to North Carolina, saw the hurricane devastation, ripped into FEMA for their incompetence, and even suggested he might end the agency. After that, he headed straight to California, where our brain-dead Governor Newsom awkwardly met him on the tarmac, standing around like a weirdo for 10 minutes before Trump graciously made his entrance. It was honestly more uncomfortable than witnessing a bad blind date. And then there's our LA Mayor Karen Bass, who thought it was a good idea to take on Trump, which felt like watching a guy with a Nerf gun walk into a tank battle. California is literally on fire, and our local leaders are too busy embarrassing themselves to do a damn thing about it. Newsom and Bass can't even manage to be normal functioning human beings, but Trump, he's handling business. So today we're diving into the biggest highlights from Trump's trip to California, starting with our brain-dead governor, Gavin Newsom, and what he said about Trump before he even landed.
When people believe such misinformation, and I don't mean it in a malign sense, maybe the president just doesn't know that there's not a spigot that can be turned to solve all the water problems that he alleges exist, that don't exist, as it relates to the state water system here in Southern California.
So we're less than 24 hours away from his visit. You're saying you haven't had any contact with the White House at all?
Well, I haven't. I'm grateful, though, that he took our invitation to heart and that he will be here tomorrow. It's my understanding. I look forward to being there on the tarmac to thank the president, welcome him, and we're making sure that all the resources he needs for a successful briefing are provided to him. There's no limit to the resources we'll provide for that briefing, and as I say, I'm grateful that he appears to be coming out.
So you plan on talking to him tomorrow?
Well, I certainly plan on being there at the tarmac and look forward to continuing to work, not just with him, the administration, as it relates to the disaster recovery, as it relates to our efforts to collaborate with multiple federal agencies over the course of the next many years.
Wow. Thank you, Governor Newsom, for this truly eye-opening performance on how to dodge responsibility and deflect blame with a smile. I mean, you really should be teaching a class on how to sound like you're doing something while doing absolutely nothing. Bravo, Mr. Governor. I don't know what this state could possibly do without your amazing leadership. Now, let's start with his first brilliant point. Trump is spreading misinformation about California's water issues. Oh, really? Mr. Governor, you're telling me there's not a spigot to fix California's water problems? Let's fact check that, shall we? What is that, Mr. Governor? Is that the magical water spigot you said doesn't exist? Well, according to former West Virginia House member Derek Evans on X, this video shows 20,000 cubic feet per second of water pouring straight into the ocean from California. Just because. Talk about a bad case of, I've got water, but I don't feel like using it. Newsom claims there's no easy fix to California's water problems, but apparently there is a whole lot of water just casually going to waste. The problem isn't a shortage. It's bad management and draconian conservation laws. California's got water. It's just too busy trying to save penny-sized fish. Now, what's interesting about Newsom's response is that Trump didn't say there's a magic faucet for water woes. If anything, he was pointing out the catastrophic water management issues that have been sitting around for years. And under Newsom's leadership, they've only gotten worse. California's water system is on the brink, and by 2040, the state could face a 20% shortfall in supply due to a combination of drought, population growth, and aging infrastructure, according to the Public Policy Institute of California. This is a reality that Newsom, along with other state leaders, has ignored for too long. According to the California Water Institute, nearly 80% of the state's water comes from only 30% of its surface area, making the system incredibly vulnerable. But instead of acknowledging this, Newsom deflects and acts like everything's fine. It's almost as if he's the one trying to spin the tail of the spigot while everyone else is dealing with a flood. Then Newsom drops the line about not meaning to malign anyone, but it's clear he's still trying to cast Trump as a liar without saying it outright. Classic political dodge. The real issue here isn't misinformation. It's Newsom's refusal to face the facts about California's water crisis. According to the Public Policy Institute of California, the state's water management policies have been failing for decades. Funding for maintenance has been stagnant, and infrastructure is crumbling. A report from the California Legislative Analyst's Office found that billions of dollars are needed to repair and upgrade the state's water infrastructure. But instead of addressing this, Newsom continues to deflect. Does he expect voters to forget about the years of inaction, or is he just hoping for more time to make vague promises while the state literally burns? Moving on to the grateful part of his show, Newsom acts like he's doing Trump a favor by accepting the invitation to help, as if it's Trump who should be grateful. But the truth is, Newsom should have been begging for federal support long before the situation became this dire. According to a report from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, federal funds for California's water infrastructure have been inadequate for decades, leaving the state dependent on short-term fixes. But now, Newsom's acting like Trump's visit is some sort of special blessing. A little too late, don't you think? Then we get this line about providing all the resources for a successful briefing. Resources? A briefing? Don't you mean a photo op? The people of California don't need another briefing. They need action. Wildfires have cost California's fire management an extra 40% in spending over the past decade, according to a study by the California Fire Science Consortium. And yet, Newsom's response to this disaster has been anything but proactive. He continues to talk about providing resources as if that somehow covers for years of neglect. The reality is that California doesn't need another briefing on how bad things are. It needs immediate action. And Newsom has had plenty of time to step up and lead. The people of California don't need more empty promises. They need a plan, and that's something that Newsom has yet to deliver. And then we're treated to Newsom's grand vision for collaboration with federal agencies over the course of the next many years. Years? Really? The state of California can't afford years of talk, especially when there's a projected deficit for the 2024-25 fiscal year, as reported by the California Department of Finance. The state's water system is crumbling, wildfires are ravaging entire regions, and Newsom's idea of leadership is dragging out discussions about working together while everyone else is suffering. The people of California don't want more endless talks. They want results, and they've been waiting long enough. Ultimately, this is not a question of working together. It's about a lack of accountability, a failure to act, and a refusal to face the reality of the situation. Trump may not be perfect, but at least he's showing up and taking responsibility where Newsom has failed. The people of California deserve a leader who isn't just talking about solutions. They need someone who is actually doing the work. So while Newsom continues to spin his empty rhetoric, it's clear that the real issue isn't misinformation. It's the failure of leadership in California. Anyway, Trump made his way out to California yesterday with the First Lady as promised, and guess who he met on the tarmac? Yes, our great governor, Gavin Newsom. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Trump made Newsom stand there, waiting outside Air Force One for a solid 10 minutes. 10 minutes, just standing there. Probably wondering if he should text Trump and be like, hey, you coming, bro? But the real kicker, Newsom wasn't even invited on the helicopter tour with the president. Nope, not even a ride along. Trump was like, you stay here, enjoy the tarmac, while he soared above in a chopper like a boss. Ouch. Pretty sure that's what they call a mic drop in politics. The two had a pretty awkward handshake. You could tell this was a very deliberate moment on Gavin's part. He worked on that handshake like it was a final exam for a class he wasn't sure he passed. You could practically hear him thinking, don't get emasculated by Trump, don't get emasculated by Trump. Trump being Trump kept his cool, thanked Newsom for coming out to meet him, and kept the pleasantries rolling. Newsom, clearly overcompensating for the awkwardness, goes and says, it means a great deal to all of us. Yeah, sure, Gavin. We all know this moment meant a lot to you. When asked if they could work together, Trump responded in his usual I'm the boss way, saying, we're looking to get something completed, and the way you get it done is by working together with the governor of the state, and we're going to get it completed. Translation, I'll make it happen. You just got to show up and do your part. Classic Trump. Always ready to take control while Newsom tags along. Anyway, shortly after that, Trump met with LA Mayor Karen Bass and several other state assembly members. And let's just say that this went very well for several people over there, especially the mayor.
Items which will prevent it or at least mitigate it from happening again. So you're going to see us proposing both of those.
Like water. Little things like water, you know, the party of common sense. See, we're the party of common sense. You're not, in all fairness.
Yes, sir.
We like water to put out fires. It's really quite efficient. All right.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Democrats are so comfortable with the majority rule they've had in California for decades that they've lost touch with common sense. And you can tell it feels new to them to be challenged by someone who actually uses common sense. Just look at Brad Sherman's logic. It's begging for a reality check, and Trump just dropped it like a mic. Sherman starts babbling about proposing items to prevent or mitigate future fires. Sounds great, right? But then Trump, the king of directness, swoops in and says, we like water to put out fires. It's really quite efficient. My impression's awful, but you get the point. And guess what? Trump's right. Water, the stuff that's been putting out fires since forever, it's simple, it's effective, and everyone's on board, except maybe Sherman, who's still over here trying to figure out what items are. It's like saying, I've got a solution for this leaky faucet. Items. Meanwhile, California is literally burning, and Sherman's still out here trying to figure out the right items to make it stop. It's like offering a Band-Aid for a bullet wound. Now, Trump isn't just throwing out a clever line. He's pointing out the massive gap between Sherman's vague proposals and actual solutions. The left loves to pretend they're solving problems with speeches to sound good, but really do nothing. Sherman's items are like telling someone, don't worry, we'll fix the fire with some magic. At least Trump's solution, water, is grounded in reality. According to the California Fire Science Consortium, water is still the best tool to fight fires, yet Sherman's over here acting like it's some kind of secret weapon. Is it water? Is it not? Who knows? Trump also exposes the Democrat Party for not being the party of common sense, and he drops the line, "You're not," in all fairness, referring to them having any common sense, which is just a polite way of saying, nice try, Brad, but that's not how this works. Sherman's so busy throwing around vague items that the whole room is probably wondering what those even are and how they'll stop the fires. Meanwhile, Trump's over here laying down the law. Water works, and everyone knows it. Sherman's approach is like going to a party saying, I'll bring the items, and showing up with an empty bag. The only thing he's preventing is the actual solution. Now, I don't have to say the obvious. Yes, water is essential, but so is a real, efficient fire prevention plan. Trump isn't overlooking that, but at least he's not sitting in a meeting talking about what items might work. According to the U.S. Forest Service, wildfire costs have more than doubled in recent years. While Sherman's still figuring out which items to buy, California is burning and getting expensive. All in all, Trump's response isn't just witty, it's a direct hit to a politician caught up in his own meaningless rhetoric. While Sherman's busy dancing around vague solutions, Trump points to the real fix, water, which works. And guess what? So does common sense. Something Brad Sherman and the left could use a whole hell of a lot more. Anyway, shortly after that, several citizens asked our mayor, Karen Bass, when they will be able to have access to their homes again, and how long will it take for the debris to be removed so they can start rebuilding and applying for the permits so they can rebuild. Some of that timeline is a little fuzzy, and the number of 6 months is thrown around, and then Karen Bass says this.
And the number one thing that we are going to do immediately, and you will see this happen, is to clear out the debris. And you know we're concerned right now over the weekend because of the potential rain, but we are going to move as fast as we can, but we want you to be safe, and we want you to be back in your homes immediately.
But the people are willing to clean out their own debris. It doesn't cost a lot.
Yes, and they can.
You should let them do it, because by the time you hire contractors, it's going to be 2 years.
If a family...
The people are willing to get a dumpster and do it themselves and clean it out.
And they can.
There's not that much left. It's all incinerated.
That's right.
And, you know, it's just going to take a long time if you do. You can do some of it, but a lot of these people, I know that guy right there that's talking, I know my people. You'll be on that thing tonight, throwing the stuff away, and your site it'll look perfect within 24 hours, and that's what he wants to do. He doesn't want to wait around for 7 months till the city hires some demolition contract that's going to charge him $25,000 to do his lot. Yeah. I think you have emergency powers just like I do, and I'm exercising my emergency powers. You have to exercise them also.
I did exercise them.
Because I looked, I mean, you have a very powerful emergency power, and you can do everything within 24 hours.
Yes. And if individuals want to clear out their property, they can.
The utter arrogance and incompetence our mayor shows, changing her answers and giving out couched responses to preserve what's left of her tarnished reputation, is honestly all a spectacle. You can tell she gets agitated as she's pressed by Trump, who is the only one there actually standing up for the constituents. This once again shows that Democrats have become so comfortable in California with their blue lock that they've forgotten who they actually represent and what it's like to get some pushback, especially from someone above them. Now let's break this all down, because Karen Bass starts talking about moving as fast as we can, as if that's supposed to be comforting to someone who's had to watch their homes burn. These constituents don't have time for vague promises or feel-good speeches. They need action. That's why Trump steps in and says, you have emergency powers just like I do, and you can do everything within 24 hours. What does Karen Bass do? She stumbles and says, well, I do exercise them. Okay, Karen, you exercise them? Is that like how I exercise my right to hit the snooze on my alarm? People are still waiting for action, and their homes are still buried in debris. If exercising emergency powers means doing nothing, then sign me up. According to FEMA, disaster recovery in California has historically been slow, oftentimes taking months or years to get things done because of, that thing called action being in short supply. Then the real comedy starts because Bass claims we want you to be safe, but let's be honest, safety isn't the holdup here. It's the red tape. While people are ready to clean up their own debris, Bass is holding them back like a strict librarian, saying, no, you can't clean up your own mess. We have contractors for that. Trump cuts right through and says, by the time you hire contractors, it's going to be 2 years. And he's right. FEMA's debris removal has been glacial. And we're talking about a pace so slow, it could give a snail a complex. According to the Government Accountability Office, contractors and coordination are so messy. It's no surprise it takes over a year for recovery in some cases. Trump's just trying to get things moving along. Like, hey, folks, you can clear your own lots. No need to wait for the expensive guy in a hard hat to show up 6 months later. And the funniest part, Bass gets visibly rattled when Trump presses her. She's not used to being challenged, especially by someone who isn't worried about how her PR team is going to spin it. California Democrats have been in control for so long that they think this is the way to handle a crisis. But when faced with someone who doesn't care about their political theater, they suddenly don't know what to do. According to the Public Policy Institute of California, the Democrats have held on to power so long that it's like they've been sitting on a throne made of red tape and excuses. When someone like Trump comes in and starts cutting through it, you can practically hear their gears grinding. At the end of the day, Trump's just calling it as it is. Bass is stuck in a loop of talk and safety concerns. Well, people are ready to pick up their own debris and get moving. According to the California State Auditor, the delay in recovery efforts is so bad that by the time you even get the cleanup process started, the people who need it most have already moved out. It's honestly like trying to clean up a house with a broom while the roof is still on fire. People don't need another 5-minute pep talk. They need results yesterday, pronto. And Trump's not wasting any time. While Bass is stuck in her safety first zone, Trump's out here throwing out solutions. And guess what? They're real solutions, not just talking points.
Well, yes, but you know that you will be able to go back soon.
Mr. President.
We think within a week.
That's a long time, a week. I'll be honest. To me, everyone's standing in front of their house. They want to go to work, and they're not allowed to do it.
And the most important thing is for people
time.
to be safe.
They're safe. They're safe. You know what? They're not safe. They're not safe now. They're going to be much safer. A week is actually a long time, the way I look at it. I watched hundreds of people standing in front of their lots, and they're not allowed to go in. It's all burned. It's gone. It's done. Nothing's going to happen to it. It's not going to burn anymore. There's nothing to burn. There's almost nothing to burn. And they want to go in. The people are all over the place. They're standing, and they say, why aren't you going in? We're trying to get a permit. And the permit's going to take them, everybody said 18 months. You said 18 months. You said 18 months.
Make no mistake, Karen Bass is channeling her inner Karen here, acting like she's the one calling all the shots, but instead, she's just holding up the line and delaying action. Bass starts with a pretty weak answer, stating that if individuals want to clear out their property, they can. Really? You're telling people they can clean up their own land, but at the same time, you're taking your sweet time to let them do it? It's as if she's trying to sound helpful while simultaneously not actually letting people help themselves. Trump jumps in with a reality check and says, that's a long time, a week. And he's right, a week. In the midst of a disaster, a week can feel like a lifetime when you're standing in front of a ruined home and no one is letting you do anything about it. To make matters worse, Bass casually tries to dismiss it by saying, we think within a week, as if that's some kind of solid plan. But the fact is, according to FEMA guidelines, debris removal is one of the first things that should be addressed in a disaster. And when it's delayed like this, it not only prolongs recovery, but also increases the risk of health hazards. A week. Not exactly the sense of urgency you'd expect from someone in charge. It's like someone telling you, wait a little longer while your house is burning down. Like, how much longer? What are you even doing? Then Bass throws in a line about the most important thing is for people to be safe. Ah, yes, safety. The old standby excuse when things are falling apart. But here's the thing. Trump is right when he says they're safe. They're safe. You know what? They're not safe now. They're standing outside their homes, waiting to rebuild, and you've got them blocked off from even accessing their property. It's almost like Bass is holding them hostage for her own peace of mind while pretending it's for their own safety. Newsflash, if they're standing in front of their property, they probably want to clean it up themselves, and guess what? They're not going to burn themselves down doing it. Trump cuts through the nonsense here. He sees the contradiction. Bass is making people wait for permits and contractors while they're ready and willing to do the work themselves. If anything, that sounds more like political delay than safety concerns. According to California's own disaster recovery plans, allowing residents to access their properties early can actually speed up recovery efforts. But no, Bass has decided to play the role of the overprotective bureaucrat while people are left standing around with nothing to do. It's like the mom who says, "Don't touch that," while you're just trying to help clean up the mess she made. Then there's the part where Bass tries to dodge accountability by casually tossing out, "We think within a week." A week? Really? That's just a political talking point with no substance. Trump, not surprisingly, calls out the nonsense. It's all burned. It's gone. It's done. Nothing's going to happen. It's not going to burn down anymore. There's nothing to burn. There's almost nothing to burn. Boom. This is the most clear-headed thing anyone has said in this entire exchange. It's simple logic. The property is destroyed. Nothing is going to happen. The fire's over, but instead of letting people clean up, Bass is holding them back, citing a week for safety reasons. What exactly are we waiting for, Karen? A fire to magically reappear? Do you think it's just going to spontaneously combust again because you said it's too soon? Trump also gets in a dig at the timeline, hitting her with the 18 months line, calling out how Bass keeps shifting the goalposts with vague timeframes. One moment it's a week, the next moment it's 18 months. This kind of back and forth shows a complete lack of confidence and planning on Bass's part. And let's not forget, 18 months. In any disaster recovery, that's absurd. According to the California Legislative Analyst's Office, recovery and rebuilding should ideally be done within a few months, not dragged out for over a year, nearly two, while bureaucratic procedures bog things down. But Bass can't seem to commit to a timeline because at the end of the day, it's easier to say next week or 18 months than it is to actually make something happen. It's like telling someone, "I'll be there in 5 minutes," while you're still sitting at home in your pajamas. What we're witnessing here isn't a debate over safety or effective governance. It's a prime example of how political leaders with no real answers throw around vague promises while the clock ticks and the situation worsens. Trump, as blunt as ever, sees through all the political fluff and calls it for what it is: a lack of urgency, a lack of leadership, and a complete disregard for the people who need help the most right now, not in months. Bass's response is a textbook example of indecisiveness with a side of empty political talking points. The people of California don't need more vague promises and excuses. They need leaders who act. Trump's no-nonsense approach shines in contrast to Bass's dithering. If Bass spent half the time actually making decisions as she does dodging them, maybe California would be a lot closer to recovery. Anyway, shortly after that, Democrat Assemblymember Brad Sherman once again tried to challenge Trump, this time about FEMA. And let's just say that things didn't go too well.
Mr. President, if I can just defend FEMA a little bit.
Yeah.
They brought thousands of people in. I don't know how they're doing in other states. They're doing a good job for us here. They've got a huge center that's open from 9 in the morning till 8 at night. But also, when you have a disaster this size, you need to be able to deploy thousands of people, which they've been able to do. Now, California, if we did it on our own, maybe we'd have thousands of people.
You do.
But if Rhode Island has a Palisades disaster, are they then supposed to keep
How many people do you have in California? 36? How many million? How many million people do you have?
But
You have 40 million people. You're not going to get a few thousand people? The problem with FEMA is they come from all over the country. They end up in arguments with your people from California because they want to do it a totally different way. And I can live either way, but you haven't gotten very much done with FEMA and all you have to do is look at North Carolina. It's one of the great disasters of all time.
And Mr. President, you can't have Rhode Island maintain a staff of thousands and thousands of people waiting to see if they have a disaster.
You know who came in and fixed North Carolina or the process? Other states, people from all over the country came. And you have the same thing. You have a lot of people from all over the country. Getting the people is not a problem. Getting the organization's a big problem. FEMA's incompetently run, and it costs about 3 times more than it should cost.
I'm hoping
we can spend money on schools instead of giving money to bureaucracy. It takes you so much longer. Mr. President, it takes you so much longer.
FEMA for helping our people.
And there you have it, folks. All the evidence you need that Democrats are the party of government waste and bloat. FEMA's reputation is failing to properly assist Americans during a crisis. From Katrina to the hurricanes that hit Florida and the Carolinas last year, they keep reaffirming every year that they're not capable of delivering timely aid when it's most needed. Now, it's interesting that Sherman starts off with, if I can just defend FEMA a little bit, as if anyone's asking him to. It's like watching someone try to justify eating an entire pizza by themselves while their friends are staring at them in disbelief. Oh, but they brought thousands of people in, he says, as though that's supposed to solve everything. Sure, bringing in people is nice, but if they're just standing around like a group of tourists who got lost, what good is it? As Trump rightly points out, the problem with FEMA is they come from all over the country. They end up in arguments with your people from California because they want to do it totally different than how you do it here. FEMA's response isn't like a well-oiled machine. It's more like a broken blender that's splattering everywhere and not really mixing anything. Multiple reports from the U.S. Government Accountability Office show that FEMA's response is about as smooth as a roller coaster ride and not in a fun way. According to a 2020 GAO report, FEMA's disorganized coordination during disasters has led to excessive costs and delayed recovery efforts. So Sherman's claim that FEMA is doing a stellar job really falls apart when you dig into the facts. Then Sherman drops the classic line, "We need thousands of people for a disaster this size." But here's the thing, numbers don't equal effectiveness. It's like saying you need a crowd to solve a math problem. It's not about the number of people, it's about how well they work together. According to the Center for Disaster Philanthropy, the issue is how effectively these people are deployed. California, with its massive population of over 40 million people, is not the same as, say, Rhode Island, where you could probably count the population on one hand and still have room left over. Sherman's trying to make it sound like more is better, but it's really about how FEMA organizes its response. The problem is FEMA is like that friend who agrees to help you move out, but shows up late. Then just stands around saying, do you want to grab the TV? Meanwhile, California residents are waiting for aid they're not getting fast enough. In fact, during the 2017 and 2018 wildfires, FEMA's delays meant that people had to rely on local leaders to help clean up the mess, which only made the disaster drag on longer. The California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection reported that it took over a year to clean debris from the campfire. FEMA was too busy playing catch up. Now, Trump doesn't miss a beat when he calls out Sherman. How many people do you have in California? 36? How many million? Sherman stumbles over his numbers because it's a killer question. Yes, California is huge. But that's not the problem. Trump's point is simple. FEMA, with all of its resources, still can't get it right. As Trump points out, it's about coordination, not just having thousands of people. I mean, just take a look at the hurricane response in the Carolinas. Trump rightly points to that and says other states, people from all over the country came, implying that it was actually the state-to-state cooperation that saved the day, not FEMA. According to the National Response Framework, successful disaster recovery is driven by local and state coordination, not by FEMA's paper-pushing bureaucracy. And while FEMA had people in the mix, it was the surrounding states that came together in the clutch, not FEMA's endless red tape. Sherman then pulls out the Rhode Island argument, saying, how are small states supposed to maintain a massive disaster response team for something that may never happen? Well, they shouldn't. The whole point is that FEMA should be able to handle it. Trump's response, getting the people is not the problem, getting the organization is a big problem, is pure gold. It's like saying, it's not that we don't have enough chefs, it's just that they're all stuck in the kitchen arguing over who gets to use the stove. According to a 2019 report from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, FEMA's administrative costs are outrageously high, more than 10% of the total funds allocated for disaster recovery. That's ridiculous. When you consider that other federal agencies don't have to blow through 3 times more money than necessary to get things done. Then Trump delivers a final blow. FEMA is incompetently run and it costs over 3 times more than it should cost. This is where Trump really hits it home. Why should taxpayers foot the bill for a bloated, inefficient bureaucracy? Instead of spending billions on FEMA's operations, Trump suggested the money could be better spent on something that actually benefits the people, like schools. According to the U.S. Department of Education, public education spending continues to climb, but the results are underwhelming, thanks to inefficiencies in the system. If we can't even handle disaster recovery efficiently, maybe it's time to redirect some of that cash to something useful, like fixing the real issues in the system. And by the way, I say that without even addressing how also utterly inefficient and bureaucratic the Department of Education has also turned out to be. At the end of the day, Sherman's defense of FEMA is as weak as a soggy paper towel. His arguments fall apart as soon as you bring in the facts. FEMA isn't sending enough people, it's sending the wrong people and then not organizing them properly. The problem isn't the size of the team, it's the chaotic nature of FEMA's response. Trump's no-nonsense approach cuts through that fluff, pointing out the real issues: FEMA's incompetence, inefficiency, and the absurd costs that go with it. The people of California and other disaster-stricken areas deserve better than FEMA's bloated bureaucracy. They deserve real, effective leadership. And maybe it's time we stop paying for a disaster relief system that needs as much help as the victims themselves. California is quickly becoming a case study in what happens when Democrats lock down power and let bureaucracy run wild. It's like watching a train wreck unfold in slow motion. More time in office, more forgetfulness about what real action looks like. Just look at FEMA, for instance. Brad Sherman's defense of the agency is like a lifeguard trying to save someone from drowning while holding a bucket full of holes. The people of California are standing right in front of their homes, ready to clean up, ready to start rebuilding. But you have Mayor Karen Bass and her team busy making sure nobody does a thing without the proper paperwork. What exactly were we waiting for, Karen? A bureaucratic permit to breathe? Now, Trump may be blunt, but he cuts right through the nonsense by calling out FEMA for what it is, a mess. We're spending more money than we should, but getting a lot less in return. And the real question is, why are we letting this go on? Why can't we cut through the red tape and get this disaster relief moving? At this point, if bureaucratic nonsense were an Olympic event, California would have a gold medal. So what's the deal? Are we ready to start holding these politicians accountable, or are we just going to keep watching this circus? Anyway, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.